What we're doing here is celebrating a reunion of our squadron. We've been together now for 57 years, and the squadron, which originally had 51 pilots in it, is now down to 21 pilots. And of the 21, we have 13 here tonight, which is a pretty good representation.
I just decided it was time to get us all together again, because we're all pushing the end point. And so I approached the guys about a year ago, and I say, look, let's do it again. And where would you like to go? And they said, New Orleans.
Oh my goodness, excuse me. Hi, honey.
My family that lives over here on the North Shore helped in the 1993 reunion. And when I asked them if they would help again, everybody pitched in. And we had cousins doing gumbo and red beans and rice and fried fish and, everything good you could possibly imagine.
Awesome southern turnip greens. How you doing?
I tell you, I'm the luckiest man in the world to have a family like this.
These people are probably the best friends I've ever had.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I've not met one of them that I didn't like. I've not met one of them that I couldn't put my arm around him and feel that he's a brother to me. And I'll tell you, they helped me get through a part of life that I would have never made it if it hadn't been for their friendships, it hadn't been for their camaraderie, and hadn't been for the protection they gave me when I was flying.
I think one of the unique things about the Black Sheep was that the Boynton himself, our leader, he was an interesting person, controversial. He always was in trouble, but when he got into an airplane to fight, boy, I'll tell you, he was something special.
The way they were organized was unique. All of the other squadrons trained as a unit in the States. They were shipped overseas to the South Pacific and stayed as a unit. And they'd been trained together for maybe upwards of a year. The Black Sheep were a bunch of casual replacements. They were sitting around waiting for assignments. Some of them had 1 or 2 more combat tours to complete. Others were brand new replacement pilots. And they had no home. And then along came this guy, Pappy Boynton, who was out of favor with the Marine Corps and had just broken his leg several months earlier in a brawl. And after he recovered, he went looking for a squadron and said, look, here's all these guys available. They don't belong to anybody. They're in a pool of pilots. And we can get some Corsairs and train these guys and put them in combat. And at that particular time, they really did need a combat squadron desperately for a campaign that was getting started. So they were unique because they really were a bunch of disenfranchised pilots. They had no home, and he gave them a home. And their name as the Black Sheep was really an appropriate nickname.
In the first mission we went on, we got into one good dogfight. There were 30 pilots coming from above us that were Jap Zeros. They went down through us. When the fight ended up, we had shot down 11 of them. And I remember the first one I shot down, and I couldn't really fathom what was going on because I'm as green as a hornet. And I turned around and I saw this guy coming at me head on. He was turning his lights on and off. This was a Jap that was firing at me. He wasn't turning the lights on and off. I gave him a burst. It was a head on. We had 650 to cross at 850 yards, and it would cut a boxcar in 2.
They were eating the most horrible food that you can imagine, just a completely, barely adequate diet to sustain guys at that age for what they were doing. And they were flying sometimes 6 hours a day on maybe 3 missions. And then at night they were losing sleep because they were being harassed by Japanese bombers. There were diseases like dysentery and malaria and dengue fever. So these guys were just getting run down physically. And they looked thin. They had nice tans because they were out in the tropics, but they were starting to waste away. And that's why they could only fly 3 6-week combat tours and then they were sent home.
And if you think about what our experience was when we were all 20 and 21 years old in the best fighter plane of its time, but with very little prior experience, being led into what got to be some pretty fierce battles, you always knew that one or more of these guys would be with you. There was never any question that you would never be alone. And I'm sure that all fighter squadrons had the same mystique and same aura and feeling of fellowship. But we've been particularly close because we all started out raw, untrained, and those of us who survived have just a common bond. And I think probably all combat units who've been shot at and hit developed the same esprit.
The Black Sheep happens to be the only squadron in U.S. history that was featured in a network television series.
Many of you know us from the TV show. The series, of course, starring Robert Conrad, was filmed and shown in 1976. During the course of its showing, the first 2 or 3 episodes, all of us were pretty much infuriated with the way we were being presented.
It was highly fictionalized as far as nurses and all the beer drinking and booze that they were able to put away every time they flew. I think they fought with each other on just about every episode, fist fights and all kinds of brouhahas, and it really wasn't like that.
And it referred to all of us as drunks and misfits and escapees from court martials and so forth, and we didn't like that at all. Nothing we could do about it, and I've often told people that if you'll just disregard the stuff on the ground and focus your attention on the airplanes and the airplane scenes, it's a wonderful series.
Millions of people saw Pappy and the Black Sheep on NBC 25 years ago and fell in love with the Corsairs.
This is a F4U 1D, and it was signed by the 12 Black Sheep pilots that were here at this reunion. Just to see the Corsairs fly in the air and the silliness on the ground was not important. It was the airplanes in the air, the Corsairs. Those airplanes were super, absolutely super.
Universal did something special by renting 6 F4U Corsairs for the show, and that really made a big difference. People knew what the Black Sheep had flown over in the Pacific, and they got the right airplane for the show. And then there was Robert Conrad, who was so similar to the Pappy Boyington character that he was playing that he came across just like the real Pappy.
Now, as you probably know, the History Channel about a year ago brought 2 groups of us back to New York City and filmed 30-minute interviews with each of us. And they have now reshown the series, I think, on Saturday mornings. And at commercial time, they inject a little snippet from one or more of us who has something to try to bring the series down to earth, to say this is really what truly happened.
We had author of the Black Sheep book, Bruce Gamble, here with his family, and he brought his new book, Black Sheep 1, which is an interesting thing about Boyington.
I didn't really have a warm, fuzzy feeling about Gregory Boyington. He wasn't a character I greatly admired because I'd compared his autobiography, Baba Black Sheep, with the documentation that I was able to collect from the Marine Corps and the interviews that I gathered from the pilots that flew with him. And his version and what I would consider the documented version did not agree. I found that he had done a lot of embellishing. So he seemed somebody less than the all-American fighting man that I had thought he had been earlier. But after writing the first book about the Black Sheep, I began to learn a little bit more about Pappy Boyington. I learned about Boyington's alcoholism. I learned what made him tick. And I had a whole different change of perspective about who he was after I learned about what that disease is and the dynamics that it causes and how it affects people. This book it's a cradle-to-grave biography of Gregory Boyington. It begins with his childhood in Idaho, goes through his entry into the Marine Corps, how he flew with the Flying Tigers in China and Burma, and then flew with the Marine Corps in the Pacific, and then about the writing of his autobiography and his association with Robert Conrad and the television show. And it covers a lot of new territory. There are an incredible amount of myths and misconceptions about him, many of which he created and perpetuated. And this gets to the bottom of some of them, explains where they came from, corrects a few, but it doesn't make him out to be a bad guy. He's still somebody to be admired.
Pappy was a tagger. I lost my dad when I was 4 years old, and Pappy was so good that he knew that this kid's not going to make it unless he gives me the training that I needed. He taught us to shoot the Japs when they're coming out of the sun by holding up your thumb. He taught us to do the thatch weave. He was a super guy because he had been flying with Chenault.
I stayed in the Marine Corps for 30 years and flew, again, combat in Korea and combat in Vietnam. But the highlight, really the high point of my life to date, and I'm 79, was the few weeks we had together as the squadron. Those were the most wonderful days I've ever had. And I look back and realize they were the most dangerous, but that doesn't really matter. That's why we formed these bonds. We all survived the same thing.
I guess, you know, after this gathering again, I'd like to do it again. You know, let's not wait 5 years. You know, let's try and do it every 2 years or so. You know, we're all getting around 80 or more, and it's time that we enjoy the rest of our comradeship.
To the place where Louis dwells, to the dear old temple bar we love so well. Sing the women booths assemble, with their glasses raised on high, and the magic of their singing casts a spell. Yes, the memories of their singing, of the songs we love so well, shall lie wasting, and the forty and the rest. We will serenade our Louis, when life and voice shall last. Then we'll pass and be forgotten like the rest. Here's the chorus. We are poor little lambs who have lost our way. Ba, ba, ba. We are little black sheep who have gone astray. Ba, ba, ba. Gentlemen songsters off on a spree, damned from here to eternity. May the Lord have mercy on such as we. Bye.